Welcome back to Harvest Moon Farm. My name is Mickey and this is my husband Joe. And today we are working on part 2 of our new goat pen. So we're over on the new side that we made last weekend. And today we're going to build the shelter for the goats to go in at night and when the weather is bad or when it's cold. So we bought some lumber and some different things to start building this. So we're laying out the frame right now. So this is, I don't remember, I think this is the front. This will be the front of the shelter. And so we've laid the 3 of the boards out, and then Joe is just using the drill to screw the pieces together so that we can create our final frame for this, for the front of this shelter. And it is horrendously hot on this day that we're working, and so we are just, I mean, you are dripping sweat just standing there doing nothing. And there was a little bit of a breeze, but it didn't always last long enough to make us feel better. So there we are working on the other 2 corners. And we're also, we didn't mow inside there because we're going to let the goats in and let them eat some of that, so we didn't want to mow any of it down. So we are kind of fighting with the grass a little bit when he's trying to put those screws in. And the ground is not level right where we're at, so I'm kind of helping him hold the boards so that they're leveled out enough so that when he puts the screws in that it's straight. And then once we get this piece built, we're just going to lean it up against the fence, and then we're going to build the back section the same way. And on this day that we're working, like I said, it's really hot, and Joe had already run a half marathon, a race that he does every year in the city. He had already run that this morning, and so he's already exhausted from running, and now we're out working in the heat, and we're outside for about 4 or 5 hours working on this, and then he ended up actually mowing our property, just up by the house. He ended up mowing and weed eating and all of that before he stopped for the day. So we've let the girls in, and so they're super excited because it's all new, and the grass is exactly the same, but it clearly tastes better on this side of the fence. So now we're standing up where we've created the front and the back and trying to get it to kind of stand. We've got the wheelbarrow, I think, at one end, and then I'm holding the other end so that we can put the slats, the cross pieces in, and kind of figure out how we want this to go together. So what we've done is create the front of the shelter so that it is taller than the back, so that any rain or snow or whatever that we get will run off the back of the roof section. So we're discussing how we want to set this up so that it's going to work, and how we need to hold this, because the front section is 8 feet tall, the back is 7, and neither one of us clearly are that tall. So we're trying to figure out the best way. Oh, so there he's measuring to make sure we know how long to cut this 2x4 so that we can attach it. So the first thing we did was, I think we made this 5 feet deep, and so we've just cut a a couple of 2x4s that are 5 feet long, and then we're just screwing them in as support braces for the sides. And then we're going to cut the pieces for the angled top. You can see that we've already done the one on the other side, and so I'm holding this one level for him so that he can get it screwed in. So, still don't know if you can tell. We put the back 8 feet tall and the front 7 feet tall, so that we can have it. The front is taller. I don't know what I just said, but the front is taller so that we can angle the roof backwards so that water and snow and whatever will run off the back of this shelter.
I mean, it'd be kind of dramatic, but the more dramatic, the better.
It's not going to be real dramatic. So rather than get ladders and step stools, we flipped the frame over on its side so that we could do the roof section without having to stand on anything. And so here we are getting it set up and trying to figure out how to get the roof support screwed in. And we may have gone the wrong direction here. Oh no, we did one side and now we're flipping it the other way so that we can do the other side. So now we're going to flip it back so that it's standing the right direction. And so now it's not level because, like I said, the property is not level right there. But you can see kind of what we were trying to do. And so I think now that we've got it to this point, we are going to move it over close to where we want it while we finish building. Yeah, so there we've moved it over. We're going to put it in that corner where the two sections of the pen meet. So we wanted to get it close to that while we worked on it because it's going to be obviously heavier once we get all the rest of the wood and plywood on there. So I'm not sure what we're discussing there, but we're probably trying to figure out how to make something work. A lot of discussions during the afternoon here trying to figure out how to make things work right. And of course, it's hard to make somebody else see what's in your own head. And so each of us trying to explain to the other what our thoughts were was kind of hard sometimes. So I think he was putting another support bar across the back just to make it more steady. And we did realize later that part of the reason this is still kind of wobbly is because we didn't put any supports at the very bottom on the sides. We have the ones that are partway up, but we didn't put any at the bottom, and we ended up putting them in later, but it would have helped kind of steady this whole frame if we had done that to begin with. And we will, of course, have a doorway on this front section, but Joe put in this other support bar, this other crossbar, again, to just help steady this and make it a little less wobbly while we were working on it. And then that'll also give us something to attach the plywood to that we put on the front for the side that doesn't have the doorway, and then he just cuts that other section off. And I think now he's talking about roof supports. And so we're going to measure those and see how long we need to cut them. And I think we also discovered, oh no, sorry, we're trying to figure out how big to make the doorway and which side we want it on. And so we're discussing the different options for how we want the doorway to look, or where we want it situated, I guess. When we put the roof supports on the sides, we didn't make them so that they cut off at the corners. We were just going to leave them with an overhang, and then we realized that wasn't going to work in terms of the walls and the actual plywood on top of the roof. It just wasn't going to line up correctly. So we are taking those back down. He's going to cut them and then put them back up.
I told you guys we learn from our mistakes. We just make new ones every time because, you know.
So right here we are measuring and cutting, and maybe he's already cut all of them, but we're putting up the additional roof supports, and we're going to fasten the plywood to those supports when we get to the roof section. So he's just cut all those to the same length, and then I'm kind of holding them from the ground while he uses the step stool to reach them. So now that we've got the basic frame of the shelter built, we are going to start measuring and cutting our plywood and getting it fastened to the framework. So our sheets of plywood are 8 feet tall, so we've got to cut the top off of them, and then we are, I think, 7 feet wide, so we've got to cut a little bit of the side off of that last sheet. So we're taking care of that, and then we're screwing all of those on along the sides and the top, and then anywhere that we have an extra board for support. This, when we do the side, this piece we've got to measure because our roof is angled, so we've got to cut that. And we're having some struggles because the ground is so unlevel. We're trying to get the back up higher so that our plywood is straight when we're putting it up there to try to measure it and get it cut. So we just stuck some extra 2x4s under there, and now it's a lot better. And so he's kind of holding it in place while I use a pen to mark it so that he knows where to cut it. And then we'll have to cut just a narrow sheet for that back section, since we made it 5 feet deep, and then our plywood is only 4 foot wide, so we'll have to put that little skinny piece in there that's also angled at the top, so you can see there how that looks. So here we have some roofing paper that's left over from when we built the coop for the baby chicks. So we just want to give this a little more protection, so we are adding a layer of this black paper to the sides and back of, well, we're going to add it to this side and the back, and then we will put it on the roof too. We opted not to put it on the other side or in the front, because later on when we get this moved back into the corner, our goofy goats immediately started eating the paper through the fence. So we didn't put it any place where they could easily get to it, because we didn't think tar paper was a good thing for them to be eating. So we're just cutting strips of this and then holding it up there, and we're just stapling it into place. And it is very windy where we live, so I don't even know how many strips of staples we went through. A lot, because we just stapled it every place we could. The edges, of course, and then just random staples all around throughout the whole sheet. And so now that we've got it basically put together, and we've got our paper on the side and the back that'll be right there in that corner, we are working on trying to get it moved into that corner before we add any more weight to the structure. So it's a good thing you cannot hear our actual conversation here, because it was a very frustrating process. It was heavy, and clearly I am not nearly as strong as my husband, so I couldn't lift a lot of it, and so he was doing most of the work of lifting this structure, and so we were struggling a little bit trying to get it. We did manage finally, but it took a little bit of time to really figure out the best way to make this work. All right, so it's the next morning, and we are, let me put this where you can see. So we're doing the roof section now. So we cut a piece of plywood, and Joe's gonna go up and screw that down, and then we've got some scrap pieces that we're gonna use to fill in that section right there in the front. So he had to move the ladder back inside the fence so that he could reach to do those front sections. and then we are going to cut a strip to fill in the very top section right there where you can see that we need another piece of plywood. So we had 2 full sheets of plywood left at this point once we finished the roof, and we were afraid we were going to be just a little bit short, so we used the whole sheet here, and we used a whole sheet on the side, I believe, and then we did manage to have enough scraps to fill in the skinny pieces so that we did not have to stop and go get more plywood. Okay, so we're just about done. Joe's gonna take the tar paper up to put on the top, to put on our roof, and then we're gonna paint the outside of the front and side rather than put the roofing paper on, because the paper that we have on that side, the goats immediately started eating. We don't want them eating tar paper, so we're just gonna paint this to kind of help protect the wood a little bit.